even of its use, that at this beginning of the century consists in counting whatever is not oneself for nothing. This process has a genealogy and a name. The race for separation and de-linking. A race being run against the backdrop of a simple anxiety of annihilation. Nowadays, a good many individuals are beset with dread, afraid of having been invaded and being on the verge of disappearing. Entire peoples labor under the apprehension that the resources for continuing to assume their identities are spent. They maintain that an outside no longer exists, such that to protect themselves against threats and danger, the enclosures must be multiplied. Wanting not to remember anything any longer, least of all their own crimes and misdeeds, they dream up bad objects that return to haunt them, and that they then seek violently to rid themselves of. Constantly contriving the evil genies by which they are possessed, and that, in a spectacular turnaround, now surround them, they have begun to raise questions. These questions are similar to those that non-Western societies were asking only recently, caught as they were in the snare of the far more destructive forces of colonization and imperialism. Questions such as, can the other, in light of all that is happening, still be regarded as my fellow creature? When the extremes are broached, as is the case for us here and now, precisely what does my and the other's humanity consist in? The other's burden having become too overwhelming, would it not be better for my life to stop being linked to its presence as much as it's to mine? Why must I, despite all opposition, nonetheless look after the other, stand as close as possible to his life if, in return, his only aim is my ruin? If, ultimately, humanity exists only through being in and of the world, can we found a relation with others based on the reciprocal recognition of our common vulnerability and finitude? Today, manifestly little interest is shown in making the circle more inclusive. Rather, the idea is to make borders as the primitive form of keeping at bay enemies, intruders, and strangers, all those who are not one of us. In a world characterized more than ever by an unequal redistribution of capacities for mobility, and in which the only chance of survival, for many, is to move and to keep on moving, the brutality of borders is now a fundamental given of our time. Borders are no longer sites to be crossed, but lines that separate. Within these more or less miniaturized and militarized spaces, everything is supposed to remain still. Many are those who, encountering them, now meet their ends, or, when not simple victims of shipwrecks or electrocution, are deported. Today we see the principle of equality being undone by the laws of autochthony and common origin, as well as by divisions within citizenship, which is to say the latter's declension into pure citizenship, that of the native born, and borrowed citizenship, one that, less secure from the start, is now not safe from forfeiture. Confronted with the perilous situations so characteristic of the age, the question, at least in appearance, is no longer to know how to reconcile the exercise of life and freedom with the knowledge of truth and solicitude for those different from oneself. From now on, it is to know how, in a sort of primitive outpouring, to actualize the will to power by means that are half cruel, half virtuous. Consequently, war is determined as end and necessity, not only in democracy but also in politics and culture. War has become both remedy and poison. Our pharmacon. Its transformation into pharmacon of our time has, in turn, let loose gruesome passions that are increasingly pushing our societies to exit democracy, and, as was the case under colonization, to transform into societies of enmity. Under contemporary conditions, the societies of the North are not left unscathed by this planetary renewal of colonial relations and their multiple reconfigurations, all of which is only amplified through the war on terror and the global-scale creation of a state of exception. Now, who today could really discuss war as the pharmacon of our time without calling on Fanon, in whose shadow this essay has been written? Colonial war, since this is essentially what Fanon speaks about, is ultimately, if not the matrix of the nomos of the earth in the last instance, then at least a privileged means of its institutionalization. As wars of conquest and occupation and